Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Emergence of a working class. This is the most important point. Why labor unrest? During the early decades of Industrial Revolution, the political ideas of French Revolution, this is liberty, equality and fraternity. These are the key features of French Revolution. Which indicate the possibility of the collective mass action. The entire country, the natives of the France, they were involved in this revolution, both in creating democratic institutions in France, like parliamentary assembly. Parliament was established. Then in 1790s, they have checking the rise of prices of necessities like bread. Not only this, liberty and equality for the citizens, but everywhere there were no concept, no one was privileged by birth. Equality was established throughout the life, throughout the country, in every sphere. In Britain, political protest against the harsh working conditions in the factories went on increasing. The working class agitated to the right to vote. During the wars with France in 1790 to 1815, this French and the Britain, they were all, both of these countries, they were all against. The working class, they agitated to get the right to vote. In France, actually, what was the voting right? Equality, liberty and fraternity was there. But the right to vote was given only to the wealthy persons. They have actually developed a concept of active and passive citizens. Passive citizens were not given the voting right. They were the poor people, including women. Active citizens, they were given the voting right. So during the wars with France, the government reacted by passing new oppressive laws which denied people the right to protest. During the war period, the trade between England and Europe was disrupted. The factories were forced to stop production, unemployment grew, and the prices of essential articles of food like bread and meat rose to heights beyond the level of average wages. This was the impact, this was the effect on the industrial laborers. Why labor unrest? So here, this is the meaning of the unrest. Due to the war, the production was affected, demand was less. Due to the rivalry, workers, they lost their job, and the price of the staple diet or staple food was increased, and which was not coping up with that, the wages which were earned by the laborers or by the workers, which did not keep pace with the earning of the working class. During the period, the trade between England and Europe, which was completely disrupted, the factories were forced to stop production as it was, the demand was decreased, and unemployment also. Next, it is about the combination acts. What were the acts? In 1795, British Parliament passed two combination acts. It is actually a name of an act which made it illegal to incite the people by speech and writing to spread hatred or contempt of the king. Means no one was supposed to speak against about the ruler, constitution or government. Neither against the king, against the constitution or against the government. They also banned unauthorized public meetings of over 50 persons. More than 50 persons were not allowed. Despite these acts, protest continued against old corruption. The members of the parliament, landowners, manufacturers and professionals were opposed to give the right to vote to the working class. They supported the corn laws, which banned the import of cheaper food until the price of a corn in Britain had risen to a certain level. This is about the corn law. Next, it is about the food rights. Corn law was actually imposed by the British government on the import of the food grains, which was banned in the import of cheaper food until the prices of the corn in Britain had risen to a certain level to support their own farm producers. This corn law was imposed by British government. Food rights. There was a large-scale migration of land laborers to the towns to find the work in the factories. Because of that, the unemployment was increasing, factories were shut down, and the price of the food were also rising in the market. So finally what happened is the large-scale migration of land laborers to the towns. They have now started coming to the town, migrating towards the towns and the cities to get a job in the factories. They expressed their anger and frustrations in different forms of protest. In 1790 onwards, there were food riots throughout the country, and it was against the high prices of bread which was charged by the greedy traders due to the hoarding, black marketing. Such riots were frequent in 1795. Within these 5 years, it has become very frequent and very frequently occurred in Britain, which was considered the worst year of the war against France, but they continued until 1840s. So this was the situation. The France and the Britain, they were against of each other. Next, it is about the Enclosure Acts. The Enclosure movements also created hardship for the small land holders. This is now completely related to that agricultural fields. It is related to the peasants and the farm laborers. In the context of that, the small land holders who they are not having the large tract of land, large patches of land. From 1770s, hundreds of small farms had been merged into the large ones of big landlords. Enclosure means now they are trying to combine the lands and they are trying to create a big large lands, big large plots for the agricultural purposes. The poor rural families, they deprived of their land holdings and sought to work in the industries. As all these were now, the small patches of lands were not there, and these families who they were having the holding of the small lands and whose land were seized, and it was been just added to that the last tract of the land, and these small families, they were now forced to work in the industries. But the introduction of machines in the cloth industry had thrown thousands of handloom weavers out of work and made them very. From the 1790s, the weavers began to demand a minimum legal wage. Now, This is in the 1770s, this act, their work has started about that, the Enclosure Act. According to that, the small holdings of the land, now they have been merged together and to create a large land area for the cultivation. And the small farmers were forced to work in the industries. This is the situation of 1770s. Now in 1790s, what happened? This is when the industries, they have started using the machines, new invented machines which were introduced in the industries. Now these weavers, they have been thrown out from the industries. And by this year in 1790s, they have started demanding that minimum legal wages. And now they refuse which is actually refused by the parliament. The weavers, they restored to strike in Lancashire, one of the important industrial town of Britain. And when the government forced them to disperse, they destroyed the power looms, which they believed and deprived from their livelihood. With this, the disperse, when they have started demanding in front of the government, the parliament, they have refused to give them these facilities and they try to disperse these laborers. So in the anger, laborers, the crowd, they have destroyed the power loom. And there were similar riots of workers in the wool knitting industry in Nottingham. So this is the Lancashire, and the another incidents, the same incidents took place in Nottingham. There were also protests in Lancashire and the Derbyshire. So these all are the protest movement now started by the workers, by the laborers to increase their wages, and they have just demanded for that the legal wage, minimum legal wage to be there. Rising of farm laborers. Next point it is about that rising of farm laborers. In Yorkshire, shearing frames were destroyed by croppers. During the agricultural revolution, many of the agricultural tools and the machines, tractors, reapers, threshing machines, all these were introduced in the agriculture. But in Yorkshire, what happened? The shearing frames were destroyed by croppers who had been previously shearing sheep by hand. In 1830, the farm laborers rose in riots when new threshing machines were introduced which separated the grain from husk. So these are the first one is the croppers. They have shearing frames were destroyed by them, by the croppers. Then earlier it was that the shearing of sheep was done by hand. Now it has been started using with the help of the machine. Then threshing machines were also introduced to remove the food grain, cereal or from this grain from the husk. The rioters destroyed these machines. 9 of the rioters were hanged and 450 were banished to Australia as convicts. Australia was also in those days under the control of Britain. It was the colony of Britain. So 9 rioters were hanged and 450 they were just exiled to Australia. In those days, Australia was also the colony of Britain. Then this is the very important Luddism movement. After this Chartist movement was another type. Was another type of protest. It was led by General Ned Ludd, and the period mentioned is about 1811 to 1870. This is the 6-year period, and the participants in this Luddism and the Luddism movement, they demanded a minimum wage, control over the labor of women and children, work for those who become jobless due to the coming of machines, and the right to form trade unions. So these were the demand put by the protesters who they were involved in the Luddism movement. The simple demand were put up by them. minimum wage, control over the labor of women and children. Because in previous part we have already discussed the small children, they entered in the factories, in the industries, right from the early morning 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock until late night, late evening 10 to 11 o'clock they were working on the machines. So this way it has been given over here that control over the labor of women and children, but for those who became jobless due to the coming of the machines, and the right to form trade unions. This was the demand of General Ned Ludd, and the people, they have started calling it Luddism movement. Then it comes the Peter Phillips movement. This is up to 1819. The working population did not use legal method to express their anger. In August 1817, about 80,000 people assembled peacefully in St. Peter's Field in Manchester. Now this is known as the Peter Phillips. This Luddism movement is after the name of the General Ned Ludd. Then again we are coming to discuss about that, the Peter Phillips movement. It is also after the name of that, the one of the Miss St. Peter's Field in Manchester. It is name of a field, which is where it is. It is in Manchester, to put forward demands for right to organize public meetings and for the freedom of press. This is why this movement has started in the St. Peter Fields in Manchester. The demand was to organize public meeting and the another demand was that freedom of press. These demands are actually the most important features of democracy. And this was put up by the people who they were involved in this movement, who they gathered at the St. Peter's Field. The government ruthlessly suppressed the agitators. It became known as the Peterloo Massacre. This is the another name of Peter Phillips movement is Peterloo Massacre. Just like as the massacre, Jallianwala Bagh massacre, this is also known as Peterloo Massacre. The parliament denied them their demands by passing the 6 acts. 6 acts when passed by the parliament. They denied to fulfill the demand which has been put up by the group of the people who they organized the Peterloo movement. These acts were extended the restriction on the political activities, introduced the combination of acts in 1795. But after the Peterloo massacre, the need to make the House of Commons more representative was realized by the liberal political groups. This is the name of the political party. House of this Commons, they were more representative. The elected representatives were there. And they realized by the liberal political groups, the government had to repeal the Combination Acts in 1824 and 1825. This is about that, the Luddism movement. And this is the movement organized in the St. Peter's Field in Manchester, known as the Peterloo movement. Reforms through the legal, from by the law. How the reforms has been introduced. First is about that the Factory Acts. In this act, different acts were passed in the different years. The first Factory Act was passed in 1802. According to this Factory Act, which was passed in this 1802, laid down the children under 9 were not to be employed in the factories, and that factories were to be properly ventilated and whitewashed. So this is passed in the 1802. Then second, it is the next Factory Act. It is in 1819. According to this, fixed the working day of the children between 9 and 16 at 12 hours. This is the 12 hours, the time duration to be fixed for the children between 9 to 6 years. 18-19, 12 hours working for 9 to 16 years of children, they can work only for 12 hours. Then next step was taken by the government and they passed the Factory Act, which in the year 1833. According to this, the sum of that, the points were given with this act. The first one is that children between 9 and 13, between the 9 and 13 years, they were to work for 9 hours at the most. The time duration was now reduced in the year 1833. 1819 it was 12 hours and the age for the children was fixed for the 9 to 16 years old. In 1833, 9 to 39 and 13 years, these children can work in the factories, but their timing will be only 9 hours. That is the maximum. Then next it comes young boys between 13 to 18 were to be employed for not more than 12 hours. They are not supposed to keep these children or these young people inside the factory more than 12 hours. Paid factory inspectors were appointed with the powers to find those who did not follow the factory laws. Now, this is the new thing which has been developed in the industries with the help of the government, with the help of the law. Now, the factory inspectors, they are appointed with the powers to find those who did not follow the factory law. Compulsory education system, which was also for the children in the factories, was provided by this act. 2 hours a day were to be spent by the children in the school, and finally after the long hesitation, 10 hours bill was passed. So this is the final conclusion with this. The law, when it has been legalized, the entire things were controlled for the children. Then how these acts were implemented in mines and the collieries. These mines and the collieries also, they have passed an act. In 1842, the government passed the Mines and Collieries Act, by which nobody under 10 and no woman or girl was to be employed in the mines. The Fielders Factory, this is the Fielders Factory Act, which was passed in 1847. First it was passed in 1842, then next it was passed in 1847, which laid down that the children are under 18 and women should not work for more than 10 hours a day. This is now the time period which is fixed for the children and women. But these laws were not properly enforced by the factory inspectors, and the inspectors were paid very low salaries. Why it was not effective? Because the salary were very low and were easily bribed by the factory managers. So this way the corruption was there. The parents lied about the real age of their children so that they could work in the factories and contribute to the family due to anyhow to increase their income level. Such type of the practices were started in the factories. After making the law, after making the acts also, it has not been completely controlled. This is the condition of the small children, how they are just standing upon the stands and they are working on the machines. In the previous part, we have discussed about that, the Davy's safety lamp. So this is the the laborers and the workers who they are working in mines, they are using and wearing this cap to get light inside the mines. And this is the height of the child labor. Then the last topic it comes about that, the historian's viewpoint, which is our viewpoint on the debate. Was there an industrial revolution or not? The different historians, the different philosophers, they have given their idea about this industrial revolution. This is the debate on this. Until the 1970s, the historians used the term industrial revolution for the industrial and economic changes that occurred in Britain in 1780s to 1820s. They pointed out that the changes were so abrupt, profound and far-reaching, so tragic in their combination of material progress and social sufferings, that they may well be described as revolutionary. What it is? It is about revolutionary. This is all explanation given by them. But Arnold Toynbee, the beginning part also we have discussed about that first. This was the man who has used the term industrial revolution. He popularized this term industrial revolution in his book Lectures on the Industrial Revolution. Arnold Toynbee, in his book Lectures on Industrial Revolution. In that he has explained about the Industrial Revolution, and this term was used very earlier by the writers like Karl Marx, who has given the theory about socialism. So before that also Karl Marx also has used the term Industrial Revolution, Friedrich Engels and Sir John Stuart Mill. The above view about the industrial transformation has been challenged on various grounds. So what it says about that, the industrial transformation in England as a revolution is a misnomer. It is not based on the facts. According to them, revolution is some event or happening which is violent, sudden and spectacular both in form and effect. Any change that is sharp and sudden is revolution, and the one which is gradual, slow and imperceptible is an evolution. So this is their philosophy about that. They are correlating it with that. It is not a revolution. It is an evolution. Because this is the gradual change, gradual development. So some of this who they oppose the theory, they are telling that the revolution is the event like that which happened on the violent basis, the sudden change. But this industrial revolution did not happen like that. It is a gradual process, gradual development. So they considered it is an evolution. So the economic changes that occurred in England in the middle of the 18th century were neither sharp nor sudden, because the process of change had started almost since 1644, a century before the industrial revolutions. What is the logic and the reasoning behind the industrial revolution? Some of these scholars, they were telling that this process has not been taking place in the 1860s, but long back since the 1644. In the 1644, a century before the industrial revolutions, these changes were very gradual and slow and imperceptible. Even up to the middle of the 19th century, large regions of England had no factories or mines. In the middle of the 18th century, this industrialization started in England, but many of the cities and the towns, they were not having any factories or any mines. The changes came only around the cities of London, Manchester, Birmingham or Newcastle rather than throughout the Britain. So very few the cities. This is what they are telling. It has only developed or introduced in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Newcastle, not throughout the Britain. So the term revolution is regarded as inaccurate. It is not accurate. Misnomer means not accurate. Inaccurate. This is together. Inaccurate. Then other thing what it says that the impressive growth of cotton textile based on new machinery was during 1780s and 1820s. But this industry relied on non-British raw material, on sales abroad, especially India, on non-metallic machinery with few links with the other industries. The use of metallic machinery and the steam power was not very common. So these are the logic put by the different scholars. So they are not accepting it in a form of a revolution. The sustained industrialization occurred only after the 1850. This is only after 1850. After the Battle of Waterloo and 1815 to 20, the period AD 1793 and 1815 experienced disruptive effects of French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars and the growth of industrialization and of productive investment suffered. It was only after the 1820s that the levels of production and installation of new machines grew steadily. The growth, the pace, it has started after 1820s. The technical progress was not limited to cotton, iron and engineering industries. It was also visible in the other branches such as agriculture, processing and the pottery. There also the new machineries were introduced. Britain tried to do two things simultaneously during this period. This period means that the 1760s to and the 1850. This is the 2 years, and this period actually mentioned namely industrialization and to fight wars in Europe, North America and India. Capital that was borrowed was used to fight the new wars and it was not invested in industries. Whatever the profit was earned and which was borrowed, that was used and invested in to fight the wars. It was not been invested in the establishment of industries. About 35% of the cost of the wars was met by taxing people's income. This is what we are calling nowadays income tax. In those days also, this income tax were collected from the people for the development work to meet the war expenditure. Workers were transferred out of factories and agricultural farms to the army to fight wars. Due to all these things, food prices rose. Napoleon's continental system blocked British exports to Europe. It also slowed the process of industrialization because many of the reforms, continental system, uniform weight and measurement, uniform currency, all such things, decimal system, trade barriers, all such things were introduced. These reforms were introduced by Napoleon, which also becomes a difficult and block the export of the British to European countries. The word industrial used with the word revolution is too limited, not in all the fields. It is used in a limited form. The transformation extended beyond economic and industrial spheres. Two classes of the society, the bourgeois and the new class of laborers, proletariat, middle class and the labor class, the working class, who they earn their living by earning the wages, or the wage earners, workers. That these two classes became very prominent, bourgeois and the proletariat. From the 1850s, the proportion of people living in urban areas went up dramatically and most of them were industrial workers. In Britain, there was far more rapid rate of industrialization than that had been witnessed in other European countries. This is a historian A.E. Muson has suggested that there are good grounds for regarding the period 1850 to 1914 as that in which the industrial revolution had occurred on a massive scale, transforming the whole economy and society much more widely and deeply than the earlier changes. So this way, this is the debate on this, the industrial revolution. The different scholars, they have the different view. This is the use of this, the word revolution is in a very limited manner. It has not been used very broadly and widely. Some of them, they have considered it as a evolution because it was a gradual development, gradual change in the field of the industries. So this is all about that. The historian's view points debate on was there an industrial revolution.